third graders. Today we are working on problem set lesson 8. So your pink problem set for today looks just like this, lesson 8 problem set. And our I can statement for today says I can create a line plot based on given data. So we have been working on different types of graphs. The last lesson or two, we've been working specifically on line plots. And remember, a line plot is like where we have almost like a number line, and then we put X's to show how many there are of each one. So today we're actually going to create our very own line plot based on the data that it gives us right here. So today for materials, you need your lesson 8 problem set, you need a pencil, and you need a highlighter to highlight those clue words when we're answering questions about our line plots to help us to spot those clue words. All right, are you ready to get started? All right. So let's first read our directions or our story problem up top here. And put your finger or your pencil on Delilah and you can read right along with me. Okay, here we go. Delilah stops under a silver maple tree and collects leaves. At home, she measures the widths of the leaves to the nearest 1/4 inch and records the measurements as shown below. So here's Delilah's data chart. What is the title of her data chart? Let's go ahead and highlight the title of her data chart. Excuse me, and it's called Widths of Silver Maple Tree Leaves in Inches. So we know that these numbers here represent the width, how wide the silver maple tree leaves are, and they are measured in inches. Okay, so then we have all this data here. And then below it says A, use the data to create a line plot below. So before we even analyze that data, let's get our line plot ready. So let's make our big number line. So we'll make it stretch across the whole width of our paper. It'll have a beginning point and ending point. Now, when we did number lines for fractions, we usually started with a 0 and ended with a 1 whole. This is different because that would mean that all of our data here would be between 0 and 1 whole. But is that the case when we look at it? So what we want to do when we pick our beginning and our ending whole numbers here is to look at our data and see what would be our lowest number and what would be our highest number. And then we can put our endpoints on here, our beginning and ending points. So I'm looking at the whole numbers. The whole numbers are like 5 and 6 here before the fraction. So I'm seeing all 5s and 6s. Look at yours and see if you agree. You just see 5s and 6s for whole numbers? Me too. So the lowest number would be, I think, 5 wholes. So do you agree with that? Because there's nothing that's lower than 5 wholes, correct? Okay, so we'll put 5. And then would I put 6 at the end? So I don't see anything above a 6 for whole numbers, but if we have 6 1/2, 6 1/4, 6 3/4, that's going to be above a 6. So therefore, we wouldn't want to end with 6. We would need to go the next whole number past 6, which would be 7. Okay, and then what would go right in between 5 and 7? Our 6, right? We would put our 6 wholes right in between 5 and 7. So try to make that right in the middle. So again, the reason that we didn't put 6 at the end is because we have so many fractions, 6 1/2, 6 1/4. Let's see, is there any other ones? 6 3/4. So all of those fractions would be past 6. So we can't end with 6 because the fractions where we have 6 and then a fraction after it is greater than 6 wholes. Okay. And if I look up top here, she says that she's measuring the leaves to the nearest 1/4 inch. So that means each whole, I'm going to break up into how many parts. So use our knowledge of fractions when we did this. If we are breaking it up, she's measuring them to the nearest 1/4 inch. How many pieces would I have in each one of my holes? 4, right? Because if she's putting it to the nearest 1/4 inch, we're going to split each hole into fourths. Do you remember the trick that we use for making fourths? So between 5 and 6, we're going to cut it in half and cut the halves in half. And that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4. And between 6 and 7, again, I'm going to cut that into 4. So I'm going to cut it in half and cut the halves in half. And that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I have them cut into 4, so I want to label. So if this is 5 holes right here, the next one would be 5 and 1/4. Make sure that your hole number 5 will make it just as big as a fraction. So we know that this is our hole and this is our fraction. So 5 holes, 5 and 1/4. What would the next one be? 5 and 2/4. Next one would be 5 and 3/4. Good. We have 6 holes. So let's read what we have so far. 5, 5 and 1/4, 5 and 2/4, 5 and 3/4, 6. What comes next? 6 and 1/4. Then 6 and 2/4. What comes next? 6 and 1/4, 6 and 2/4, 6 and 3/4, and 7 holes. Good. So we have 2 holes. I'm going to scoop on the bottom here because we're going to be putting our X's above. So there's a hole split into 4s, and there's a hole split into 4s. And now we're ready to plot our points. So this is just like what we did last lesson, right, where we looked at each one, and then we put it on here, and then we crossed it off. So if you want to pause your video, just work very carefully. Maybe let's do the first column together just to refresh our brains of how we can be really careful of this, okay? So the first one is 5 and 3/4. So here's 5 and 3/4, X, cross it off. 6 1/2. I don't see, here's my 6. I don't see 6 1/2 on here. Is there a fraction there that is the same as 6 1/2? Eyelash in my eye. What would be a fraction that would be the same as 6 1/2? 6 and 2/4, right? Because if I look at 2/4, 2 is half of 4. 2/4 is equal to a half. So I'm going to write 6 and 1/2 right underneath it. Okay. What about on my 5s in case I have a 5 1/2, which I do? I don't see 5 1/2 over here, but is there a fraction that would be equal to 5 1/2? 5 and 2/4, right? Because 2/4 is equal to a half. So 5 and 2/4 is 5 and 1/2. Okay. So I was at 6 1/2, which we said is right here. I want to make sure that my X is the same size as the 5 and 3/4. Cross it off. 6 and 1/4 is right there. Make sure my X is the same size. Cross it off. 6 1/2. Again, it's right here at 6 and 2/4. Cross it off, and then just 6 holes. And to make sure that I'm being accurate, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you remember doing that last time? That's just an extra check because so many mistakes happen by we're just not getting all of them or we're forgetting to cross them off. So that's like a double check. If you want to pause your video and finish up now, you can do that, okay? All right. The next one is 6 inches. So here is 6. Put just a little bit of a space between it. Cross it off. 6 and 1/4 right there. Cross it off. Just 6 inches again. Put it right there. Cross it off. 5 and 3/4 is right here. Make sure that my second one matches up with the second one right next to it in 6. 6 and 1/4 is right there. So I have 5 and 10. So I'm just going to make sure I have 10 X's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm good. Okay. The next one is 6 and 1/4, which is right here. 5 1/2 is the same thing as 5 and 2/4, we said, right? 6 inches again. Make sure it's matching up with the ones right next to it. 6 and 1/4. And another 6. Lots of 6s and 6 and 1/4, right? So 5, 10, 15 I should have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm good. Okay, another 6. Holy moly, there's a lot of 6s, isn't there? 5 and 3/4. 6 1/2. Again, I'm making sure, so I have 3. So I'm making sure it's lined up with the 3 next to it. Cross it off. 6 again, 5 3/4, 5, 10, 15, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I'm good. Do you see where they seem to be mostly clustering right now? They seem to be mostly clustering like right around here, right? There's the most right here. And so far there hasn't been any that are out on these sides here. All right, so finishing up that last column, 5 3/4. 6 again, I'm going to run out of room for 6. 6 1/4. 6 3/4. Ooh, finally we have one for 6 3/4. And 6 1/2, which we said was the same as 6 2/4. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Oh my goodness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Good. I was counting so fast I lost track myself. So I have 25. So make sure that you have 25 X's. So that means how many leaves did Delilah measure? 25 leaves, right? And here's all of her measurements. All right, so if you need to pause your video and finish that up or check, make sure that your X's, the amounts that you have in each one, match the amounts that I have for each one too. So if you want to pause that and check that. I am going to, if you have a packet and not separate pages, I'm going to rip this page out of my packet just because we're going to be doing a lot of flipping back and forth to look at our data to answer our questions. Okay? All right, so on the back B, it says to explain, so that means we need words. Explain the steps you took to create the line plot. Okay, so let's make like a numbered list here. So 1, we made a number line. And labeled from 5 to 7, right? From 5 to 7. And then we filled in what? We filled in the fourths, right? And we'll say, and we'll split them and split them. Split the holes into fourths. Okay, so we made a number line and labeled from 5 to 7 and split the holes into fourths. So that will be 1. So once we split them into fourths, then what did we do? We labeled the fourths, right? We labeled the fourths. Okay, so we made a number line and labeled from 5 to 7 and split the holes into fourths. We labeled the fourths. What did we do next? We made a number line. We labeled from 5 to 7. We split the holes into fourths. Then we looked at our data chart and made our X's, right? So we looked. How should spelling be here? It should be correct, right? Because one, if you can look right here and get it right off mine, right? So we looked at the data chart and made an X for each measurement. That's it, right? And we're writing complete sentences. We did 3 complete sentences. So make sure for 1, 2, and 3 that you begin each one with a capital letter. So check right now when you're done. And make sure that each sentence ends with a period. So I'll go over it one more time while you're finishing up your writing. Number 1, we made a number line and labeled from 5 to 7 and split the holes into fourths. Kind of put like 3 steps actually into one, but that's okay. Number 2, we labeled the fourths. Number 3, we looked at the data chart and made an X for each measurement. And that's where we ended, right? We looked at our data chart and made an X for each measurement. We could say that we crossed out the ones we used, but that's okay. All right, if you need to pause and finish up B, you can do that. I'll move on to letter C. How many more leaves were 6 inches wide than 6½ inches wide? Do you see a clue word or words there? Highlight what you think the clue word or words there is. I see how many more. Give me a thumbs up if you also saw how many more and highlighted that for clue words. What does how many more tell us to do? How many more means that we're comparing two measurements and we want to find the difference in between those two measurements. So we're going to subtract. So let's put a minus sign right on top of how many more. So how many more leaves were 6 inches wide than 6½ inches wide? So let's flip it over and see how many leaves were 6 inches wide. Well, here's 6 inches, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 leaves were 6 inches wide. Okay, so we'll put that right under 6 inches. And how many were 6½? 6½ is right here. So remember we said 6 2/4, and 2/4 is the same thing as a half, so it's 6½. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll put a 4 there. And we said how many more tells us to do what? We're going to subtract. So we're doing 8 minus 4. 8 minus 4 equals 4. So how many more leaves? So 4, we'll just stick this label right in the end. 4 more leaves. What do we think? Doesn't it make it so much easier when we really pay attention to those clue words? Because if we know what those phrases, those clue word or words mean, those clue phrases, it really helps us to know what we're doing. Also, when I see the word than, that helps me to know that I'm comparing two amounts. So I'm going to subtract to find the difference between the two amounts. All right. Are you ready to move on to D? As always, pause your video if you're finishing up with C, and join us on D when you're ready. Okay, so D says find the 3 most frequent measurements on the line plot. What does this tell you about the typical width of a silver maple tree leaf? So find the three most frequent measurements. What does frequent mean? Do you remember when it says to find the 3 most frequent measurements? The ones that have the most. So we want to find the measurements that are showing up a lot. And I'm already thinking, remember when we said that there was like a lot clustered around like a certain measurement? So we're going to look and find the 3 most frequent. So where there's the most X's. So let's look. All right. So we can for sure see that 6 has some of the most. Let's just circle 6. So 6 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 6 is for sure one of the highest. Looks like 6 1/4 has a lot too, right? That looks to be the next highest. Let's count. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 3/4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 6 1/4 has 6. So that's definitely one of them. 6 2/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's not that one. So would we say 5 3/4? Yeah, because it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these 3 right here, let's put a box around these 3. Okay, so the 3 most frequent measurements are 5 3/4, 6 and 6 1/4. So they're all clustered right around there. So that shows us that most silver maple leaves are between those dimensions, right? So let's answer the question. So find the 3 most frequent measurements on the line plot. So we have the 3, we'll write a sentence here. The 3 most frequent measurements are, we said 5 3/4 was the first one, right? Yes. 5 3/4, and it's inches. We could write inches, but do you remember the little symbol that represents inches? The two little lines, right? Like that. So the three most frequent measurements are 5 3/4 inches, comma, 6 inches, the two lines were inches, comma, and what was the next one? Put a box around it. So 5 3/4, 6, and then 6 1/4. And 6 1/4 inches, period. So the three most frequent measurements are 5 3/4 inches, 6 inches, and 6 1/4 inch. Okay. We're not done though, because it says, what does this tell you about the typical width of a silver maple tree leaf? That just tells us that most leaves are between these measurements, right? So this tells us that most of those leaves are between, the lowest one was, are between 5 3/4 inches to 6 1/4 inch. Okay, so the three most frequent measurements are 5 3/4 inches, 6 inches, and 6 1/4 inch. This tells us that most of these leaves are between 5 3/4 inches to 6 1/4 inches. And there we go. Okay, what do we think? So we worked today on creating that line plot, right? And then answering questions based on that line plot. And I hope that we're feeling more and more confident with picking up those clue words to help us decide what we're going to do to solve those problems, answer those questions, okay? Good job, and I'll see you tomorrow for some more graphing. Tomorrow is our last lesson in our graphing unit. So this was a fast and furious unit on graphing, so I hope that we're enjoying it.